Development opportunities. Tune in the first and third Wednesday of each month at 9:30 a.m. to Career Source Citrus, Levy, Marion, and learn how they can help you.
Ocala's information station, 1370 WOCA.
Ocala.
All right, 7 minutes after 9 o'clock. Thank you for tuning in this Wednesday morning. I remember one time at my mom's church, we were gathering food that was going to be sent to needy places in the world. And there was a discussion about how some governments don't allow the food to actually reach the people it was intended for. And I remember how everybody was so disgusted at that, and what can we do about it? And the first thing I think that we can do about it is that we can talk about it and be watchdogs. You know, a human being that is, you know, labeled as a watchdog is a real gift to all of us, because that's the person who lets us know, hey, something is just not right here. We got to fix it. But how do you fix another country? How do you do that? You know, would you be surprised to find out that, well, we may not be doing the same thing in the same way. We may have something similar happening here in our country. We have an interesting book. It is titled The Poverty Industry, The Exploitation of America's Most Vulnerable Citizens. It's written by our guest, Daniel H. Hatcher. In the inside flap, it says, government aid does not always go where it's supposed to. Foster care agencies team up with companies to take disability and survivor benefits from abused and neglected children. States and their revenue consultants use illusory schemes to siphon Medicaid funds intended for children and the poor into general state coffers. How is that any different at all? And this is me talking now. How is that any different at all from the governments that we frown at and you know, say, gosh, that is so horrible that they're taking food away from people who are supposed to have it?
Yes.
How is it any different if we're doing it in a little bit more of a clever, sly way? Daniel is an attorney. Daniel Hatcher is an attorney. He's a professor of law at the University of Baltimore in Maryland. He worked at the Maryland Legal and Bureau and the Legal Aid Bureau and Children's Defense Fund. He represents foster children and impoverished adults. What a great contribution to all of us. He testified before Congress and the Maryland General Assembly. And again, the book is called The Poverty Industry. Daniel L. Hatcher, what a great job you've done already. Let's say good morning. Thank you. Good morning, Daniel.
Good morning, and thank you so much for that introduction and for having me on the show. And I agree with you, especially how you indicated that awareness matters, and our first step to understanding and hopefully fixing these problems is through awareness. Yeah,
absolutely. And because of that really puts you, I know you're going to be humble and say, no, it doesn't, but that puts you into the hero category. I mean, you were truly, if you can point out how our own government is taking, I mean, what's the difference between that and the pictures we see of shipping docks loaded with food, and it doesn't go to the kids and to the families that need it? What's the difference?
Well, I want to start to say thank you, but I'm just reporting facts. The heroes that I see, especially with the work that I've done, are foster children who've been through just tremendous amounts of difficulties before they come into foster care, while they're in foster care, and their struggles as they try to age out of foster care. But I appreciate that, and it's a deep concern when we have agencies across our country that exist to serve vulnerable populations, and they are significantly underfunded, but then you have these practices that are actually taking resources from the vulnerable populations that they exist to serve.
So because of the work that you've done with foster children, you must have smelled a rat, and then you started to do research. So did the research reveal, as you're writing the book, did the research reveal things that were even more absurd than you imagined?
Yes, unfortunately, and this has stemmed from both my initial work, almost 20 years ago when I started out as a legal aid lawyer, and then doing policy research and advocacy, and then moving into academia to become a law professor at the University of Baltimore, where I still teach a clinic where we represent low-income individuals. So I continued to see these issues both with foster children and other vulnerable populations where, unfortunately, aid intended to help them is being misused.
And like the elderly in nursing homes, things like that, and assisted living facilities, sometimes they're not what they claim to be.
Right. There are several revenue strategies, and often the states will work with private revenue contractors to assist with this. And nursing homes in our country, unfortunately, are not doing well in providing adequate services, good quality services to our older Americans. And then these nursing homes, both government-owned and for-profit nursing homes, are used in strategies to leverage additional federal Medicaid funds that are intended to help provide better services at these facilities, but states will then often route much of that money to general state coffers.
So you break it down to one-on-one. Let's say there's a little kid in foster care and he needs some help. Money is allocated for that child, and how does a piece of that money, or how much of that money doesn't make it to the child?
Well, so I represented a child, a former foster child, as an example, in Maryland. That I describe in the book, and he entered foster care at age 12 when his mother died, and then they're trying to find placements for him. A brother was a possibility. Unfortunately, his brother died. His father was located, and he was a possibility, but then his father died.
Oh my goodness!
So this poor kid at the time, and he's no longer a child, but he was moved at least 20 times between temporary placements. After his father died, he was eligible for survivor benefits through the Social Security system because his father worked, paid into the system, earned the benefit for his child. It's much like life insurance. But the state foster care agency applied for the benefit, applied to take control of the money as representative payee, never told the foster child that he was even eligible for these benefits that his father left behind. And then the agency took the money, and their assertion to pay back cost of care, it was routed into state revenue. It was to replace otherwise required state spending to provide the care. So not only did it take a cash benefit from this child as he was struggling, it took away an emotional connection. He could have used that benefit both for the money, but for the connection to his deceased father.
Wow. Well, good for you for doing what you're doing. As an attorney, it must be very rewarding to actually succeed in any of these cases, and I'm guessing you have to handle them one at a time. Am I right?
Yes, client by client, and I am engaged both in the individual client advocacy, and then I try to see systemic issues that are occurring, and then that helps inform my research and my writing as I look for ways that these programs can be improved on a broader scale. And it's an honor for me to also work with law students at the University of Baltimore who are representing these low-income individuals, and I often learn through the work of the students.
Now that we have the book out there, I'm curious how the public at large will respond to it and make a difference, and you will be obviously spearheading that. We'll be taking your words to use as ammunition as we try to write our letters to Congress and do whatever we need to do. I want to ask you obviously some more questions. Let's take a little break first. We'll be right back. We've got weather and a couple of commercials, and we'll be right back with Daniel L. Hatcher. The book is called The Poverty Industry. We'll be right back.
The weather is brought to you by myfwc.com. Safe boating is no accident. On this Wednesday, sunshine for the most part with a high of 87 on the coast, but up to 93 inland. Clear to partly cloudy wind tonight, low 71 to 75. For Thursday, partly sunny. Watch out for a thunderstorm, high 89 at the coast, 95 inland. On Friday, times of sun and clouds with a thunderstorm in a few places, the high 89 on the coast, 95 inland. From the Florida Weather Center, I'm meteorologist Joe Lundberg.
Central Florida Eye Institute is the area's leader in laser vision correction. From high-definition refraction surgery and LASIK vision correction to custom cataract, glaucoma, and diabetic treatment, you can count on Dr. Crowley and his effective, friendly staff to provide you with the quality care you deserve. Call 352-237-8400 for an appointment or more information. That number again is 352-237-8400. Looking forward to service your vision needs.
Hi, I'm Seth with AA Lock, Dock, and Security. Have you ever thought about the locks or security on your house or business? Have you ever wondered why the keys to your new car cost so much? Well, at AA Lock, Dock, and Security, we can help with securing your valuables. We can even replace those expensive transponder keys. We can give you the knowledge that no one else will. Call AA Lock, Dock, and Security at 867-1965. That's 867-1965.
60 minutes after 9 o'clock, we'll return to our guest in just a second. I wanted to thank Dr. Thomas Crowley for sponsoring this segment of AM Ocala Live. He is a board-certified ophthalmologist. You just heard his ad for Central Florida Eye Institute. Keep them in mind when you need your eye care needs taken care of. They do everything, whether it's something as simple as getting an eye exam and new eyeglasses, maybe contact lenses. They also go to the LASIK surgery area of that medicine, cataract surgery, corneal transplants, glaucoma treatments. They are located not far from where we broadcast, just catty-corner to the Paddock Mall. They're at 3133 Southwest 32nd Avenue. The phone number is 237-8400, centralfloridaeye.com, centralfloridaeye.com. Thank you, Dr. Thomas Crowley. Let's continue with this conversation. If you're looking at the streaming video right now, by the way, I put the cover of the book that we're talking about, so you can see the cover and write down the title. It is called The Poverty Industry, The Exploitation of America's Most Vulnerable Citizens. One thing I think we jumped to a conclusion, Daniel Hatcher, of course, is the author, and he's our guest. Daniel, one of the things we jumped to a conclusion on, and tell me if I'm right or wrong with this conclusion, is that this is 100% government corruption. Am I right or wrong about that, or is there a private sector element to this as well?
Well, I'll start with saying there are definitely examples where states are engaged in practices to try to claim more federal aid, and even working with revenue contractors where they are using the money as intended. Right. The book focus here is to highlight those examples, which unfortunately are incredibly widespread, where the money is diverted away from intended purpose. Okay. But you ask a great question, because I do agree that it is our leaders of our states and our state human service agencies that are contracting with the private companies. It's the government leaders who are responsible for deciding what the purpose of the contract should be, right? And then how that money should ultimately be used. So in Maryland, the governor of Maryland could decide to hire Maximus, and currently has a contract with a company by the name of Maximus to help obtain survivor and disability benefits from abused and neglected children. Maryland could decide to do that in a way where it then uses those funds to actually help the children, to conserve the money for the children's benefit as intended, and conserve those funds for the difficult transition as they age out of foster care. So the children actually then using their own money, right, to help in their transition out of care. But instead, Maryland is diverting the fund to general state coffers. You know, we actually have maybe a small example of what you're talking about that we were witness to. We have a friend. He's 55 years old. He has Down syndrome. He lived with his mom since he was a baby. And when his mom needed to go into nursing home situations, he was placed in the care of the state. And I happened to, and I've been a friend with him since he was 11 years old. So I wondered where he went. And I saw him standing out in the sun, and I said, "Well, what are you doing over here?" I pulled over. He said, "Oh, I'm with a group home now." And I said, "Oh, really? Okay." And I met the lady, and to be honest with you, she was really super nice. So I called him up one time, and I said, "Hey, why don't we go out for breakfast?" Because this was kind of something we used to do. Go fishing or whatever. And I went to pick him up, and the house was crowded. It was so crowded, it was unbelievable. So I said to somebody, I said, "Is there any way we can get him into a place that's not so crowded?" And I think he's even high functioning enough that he could be independent. That was my opinion. None of his family was around here. Everybody moved to California or North Carolina. And so kind of I was like a surrogate big brother in a way. Okay.
Yeah, you're the person.
Okay. Well, long story short, I got into the middle of all this, and I realized that there was a tug of war for his dollars. Mm-hmm. That the group homes were all wanting, "No, I want him. No, I want him." And I finally said, "I'm going to write a letter."
Yeah.
And I'm going to say, I think he should be independent. And you know what happened with writing that letter? He became independent.
Exactly.
And the money that was divvied up to whoever is still going to some care workers. It's not that the money isn't being spent, but he's in a better situation. And that to me was sort of an example of what you're talking about.
Well, I think that's a wonderful example, and it's wonderful that he had you as an advocate, has you as an advocate. So there could be that the funding that was being sought after is both the funds provided by the county or state for providing foster care services. So that is provided by the state government and often matched with funds from the federal government. It may very well be that for the individual that you've discussed, that he was eligible for SSI benefits, for disability benefits for a child, and if that's the case, then the state was likely taking those funds as well. Florida is one of the states that worked with a company by the name of the Public Consulting Group. They hired the company for an assessment to try to determine how to obtain more funds from foster children who are either disabled or have dead parents. And again, not to help the kids by providing them with better services, or to provide the placement, with better funds so they get better care for the child, but to take the money from the child as a state revenue source.
And sometimes you see that in assisted living facilities too, because sometimes you hear that they have these quotas. They need to have X number of people in there so they can make the maximum dollar, and they don't care how they get it or who they keep in there.
Right, and then layering on top of that, there are concerns with many of nursing facilities that are using psychotropic medications for off-label usage for older Americans in order to basically sedate them so they're less expensive, so they don't have to have as much qualified staff to care for them. And then the same nursing facilities that are doing that might be used by the counties or states in a scheme to leverage federal aid that the state then takes from the nursing facilities. You have older Americans languishing in poor care as they're being used as a source of funds.
Yeah, I hope everybody heard what he just said. That's something similar happened to my dad. When my dad was in his last months of his life, he was in care, and they were giving him psych drugs, they called them, and he wasn't the same person at all.
No.
And so we found out
It's happening.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say
it's happening. And
sorry. I think there's a delay, and so that I don't mean to sound like I'm talking over you, but let me just finish this. And then we found out what the name of the medication was, and we said no more. We do not want him being given whatever it was called anymore. Mm-hmm. And they said, oh, okay, no problem. And then they gave him another psych drug, because we weren't educated enough to know that there's more than one.
Yeah.
So. No, and that's another great but unfortunate example, and luckily he had you again as an advocate. The difficulty is most individuals who are in these circumstances don't have an advocate that understands what's happening and can then try to change the situation for that individual. But it's concerning where you have older Americans in our country who are desperately in need of good care, and they're being not just housed in poor performing nursing homes, but they're being sedated in a way like that it changes their last years of life, and a lot of people have no idea.
I have a question for you, but I just want to preface it with something. If I have somebody, and I don't right now, I gave you two examples, but they're not, our friend Doug is still our friend, but he's in good care now.
Yes.
But let's say you have somebody and you're hearing this conversation, or you're reading the poverty industry book, and you're saying to yourself, gosh, I know Mr. Smith, and I know he's getting care. And so let's just, for the sake of easy numbers, let me just say Mr. Smith gets $1,000 a month in aid, and $800 of it goes to the aid workers and the whole everybody that takes care of him, and he gets $200 a month for whatever he needs. How do we know? How do we determine because obviously you have to pay for the workers, you have to pay for the care. So it's not like we don't want any of the money to go to the caregivers. Mm-hmm. But how do you know if it's unbalanced? If the person who's supposed to be getting care isn't getting as much as they should be?
Well, that's a difficult question, because in each jurisdiction, transparency is different, and often the government structure, some programs are run at the county level, some are at the state level. Some states are worse than transparency in their budgeting process than others. So being able to follow the money is a challenge, right? And you hit on an interesting question in terms of, aid funds for an individual should be used to provide for their care. And that has been argued sometimes with a foster agency is taking disability benefits or survivor benefits from a foster child. That they would say, well, we're taking this money to reimburse the cost of care. I disagree with that because foster children have no obligation to pay for their own foster care. You know, They don't decide to be abused, neglected, and placed in foster care, and there's no requirement that they are supposed to pay for their own care. And when these agencies are doing this, and this happens in other health facilities as well, when the foster care agencies are taking the kids' resources, the agencies themselves are not actually even fiscally better off, because it's resulting in a reduction in state funding, not an additional money to the agency to provide better care.
You have a story about a father in North Carolina that you wrote about in the book who, it said temporary incarceration, and he lost his daughter because while he was incarcerated, he didn't pay the $72.80 in child support. Can you tell the audience that story and expand upon it, if you could, a little bit?
Sure. So not only are states taking survivor and disability benefits from children, they're also taking child support from children when the children are either in foster care or if their parents are receiving public assistance. The state will take the child support funds from the children in order to replenish state coffers. And you have examples in states like you mentioned in North Carolina that I discussed in the book, where they will actually terminate parental rights of an individual for failure to pay the state debt. In the case in North Carolina, this was a father who was incarcerated. He actually had a release date. He had a plan in place with the social worker in terms of reunifying with his daughter. But in the court decision that describes the case, the sole reason they terminated parental rights was because he was in prison. He had no money. He couldn't pay any child support to the state, not to his child. It was money that would have been going to the state. So they terminated his parental rights for that sole amount of under $100.
Wow. And after he got out, did he ever get his daughter back?
Not that I was able to find any information on it. I wasn't able to have direct contact with him, but I'm not sure. Now, in that case, it could have well been that there was a good placement for the child in terms of a potential adoptive resources. But there are so many children in our country where the state will rush forward to terminate parental rights, even when there's not an adoptive resource lined up, because it's all about chasing the federal funds.
That is just sad. It's just horrible. I have a copy of the Poverty Industry book. You can call me right now, and I'll put your name on it. It'll be waiting for you here at the studios. The rest of us have to go buy it. Daniel L. Hatcher is the author, and his name is spelled just as it sounds, so that shouldn't be a problem. If you're looking at the streaming video, you'll see the cover of the book and Daniel's name. Daniel, how do the rest of us buy the book? Is it everywhere books are sold?
Yes, it's available on the major websites like Amazon. NYU Press has a website, and it's available for purchase there as well. Hopefully it'll be in some bookstores. I'm not sure.
And I like how you encourage people to look at every situation with fresh eyes, especially the young people that are getting into the law.
Thank you very much. I very much think that change is possible, and the practices I'm exposing in the book are happening in red states and blue states. So this is unfortunately a bipartisan practice. And
you know what? We didn't go there, but I knew that from looking at the book, but I'm glad you brought that up, because sometimes people will blame one or the other party. All right, let me give the book away. Good morning. You've got the book. Who's this?
This is Jim.
Okay, Jim, it'll be waiting for you here at the studios, okay?
Thank you.
Thank you. Daniel, I truly think that what you've done is an act of heroism. You are a watchdog, and the message you're sending out there is going to cause better situations for a lot of people in our country. Thank you, Daniel.
Thank you so much for having me on the show.
All right, we'll be right back.
Fox News Radio, I'm Lillian Wu. Hillary Clinton says she sees Donald Trump as a danger to the economy.
Which was in a recession when Barack Obama took office.
Trump would take us back to where we were before the crisis. He'd rig the economy for Wall Street again.
This morning, Trump will deliver a rebuttal to Clinton and discuss what he's called Clinton's failed policies and bad judgment. Recent polls show that voters believe Trump would handle the economy better than Clinton.
Fox Radio's John Decker. Clinton speaking on the economy in Raleigh, North Carolina today. The Southwest continues to get hit with blistering heat.
Meanwhile, heavy rain will come down across states like Ohio and also in West Virginia, with potentially up to 6 inches of rain possible over the next few days.